Today's topic is Autodesk Upchain and an introduction to Upchain. So the idea is I want to talk about first the business case for Upchain. If you've seen other presentations about PLM software, a lot of this may be review because Upchain is fundamentally PLM software. But I still want to go over it for anybody who's not familiar with PLM, and also make sure you understand the case for data management and product lifecycle management. And then we'll move into discussing where Upchain fits in Autodesk's now somewhat crowded PDM/PLM software lineup. And then we'll get into a fairly high level, a very high level review of Upchain from a functional perspective. You know, what can it do and what is it good at? Right. So let's talk first about the business case for PDM and PLM in general. Before we get into that, I do want to clarify right from the get-go, Upchain is completely cloud-based, PDM and PLM all in one. So if that's something you're looking for, that's great. If you had no idea what Upchain was and you don't need any of that, hopefully you'll stick around to learn. But when we're talking about PDM and PLM, its whole reason for existence is to help solve data management challenges and business challenges. So there are lots of such challenges, many of which have been exacerbated by the pandemic, right? Globalization is a big one. Even now, small and medium business, I talk with companies every day that have work being done in India or China or Vietnam, Taiwan. It's all over the globe now. Even small businesses, I think largely because of the internet and collaboration and the ease of connectivity between people, they're able to take advantage of offshoring work. But that comes with its own challenges, right? Process bottlenecks, another really big challenge, bottlenecks in general, right? But process bottlenecks, managing change, managing releases, managing quality, proper execution of like executing changes and releases, proper quality management. There are all processes involved there. In the absence of a good digital solution to help you manage those processes, they break down pretty quickly. And you can't always get the level of complexity you need to properly manage things if you're just doing stuff with paper, for example. You just can't keep track of it. Inadequate data sharing. Most people have an internet connection right in their hand these days, but it's still often difficult to share the right data with the right people at the right time in the right way. You know, you can put stuff up on Dropbox, you can send emails, FTP sites, you know, Autodesk 360 or Fusion Team. There are lots of ways to get data up like onto the internet or to someone, but they all have problems. Repetitive and manual efforts. This is one that we've been working a lot with our customers lately to resolve, especially in the Vault, Autodesk Vault world. Getting rid of those things that you do every time you have a release and it's just busy work. You can offload those sorts of things, right? Or manual efforts where someone is retyping information or someone has to remember to do something, like publish a visualization file. forgetting to do something like that or making a mistake when you're rekeying data can be anything from a minor annoyance to an incredibly expensive mistake. A lack of collaboration. The pandemic has really highlighted this with people, at first, lots of people working from home, and now I see a lot of our customers have people sort of half in, half out of the office. Maybe you're never quite sure if someone's going to be there that day. Someone tests positive for COVID. Now they've got to be out of the office for 2 weeks and in isolation. Being able to work through those struggles, even now 18 months on to this whole current mess, we still see companies struggling with getting everybody on the same page when they're no longer in the same room. And then, of course, something I hear at least, I don't know, a dozen times a day in the news, if nothing else, supply chain issues, right? There's a lot of talk now about the inflation rate year over year and how much of that is due to supply chain problems. And, it's a complex problem to solve. Your ability to interface with your suppliers efficiently is going to have a direct impact on how successfully you can weather the kind of storms that we're going through today. Right. So now, a big part of the problem and a big reason these challenges are present today is because a lot of our systems, both process and our software systems, are designed for the past and they're not connected. Right. In the past, a lot of cases, everything was done in-house. Vertical integration. It's interesting. There seems to be kind of like two approaches happening these days that I see. Some companies are really aiming for as much vertical integration as they can have. They want as much control as they can possibly have in-house. But that really limits your flexibility. And I think most companies these days have resorted to more of a outsourcing, especially a lot of manufacturing, buying as much as you can so that you don't have to retain inventory, and even outsourcing design now we're seeing, which is way harder than just outsourcing manufacturing. It's relatively straightforward to send someone a drawing and a CAD model and agree on, here's what we need you to make for us, and we need this many, and here's what it's going to cost. Outsourcing design work is a much more difficult proposition all the way around, managing the data, communicating with those outside sources. And we no longer necessarily have the benefit of dictating from the top down, here's what you're going to use and here's how you're going to use it. It's more of a, well, we need to be able to choose the right resource, and the right resource, this external company, they use this software. We need to be able to interface with that. Our systems need to be able to accept that kind of information and manage it properly, right? And a lot of systems today that have been around for 15, 20 years or more, they're not necessarily good at doing that, right? And we see this a lot. Companies that can adapt to that environment, and we're able to adapt to it early, have been successful. We're seeing some of our other customers sort of play catch up, where they realize our competitors are doing this. They're more successful as a result. Now we're scrambling to catch up to where they've been for the last year or 5, right? And if we're talking about like the old way of managing data, especially with the lack of any PDM or PLM at all to manage that, especially engineering data, there are real impacts to not having systems like that, right? Multiple months per year of very expensive resources not able to find what they need when they need it. Or if you do have systems, they've sort of kind of grown up in various silos, like quality has their system and engineering has their data management system. And then of course you always have ERP. And if you're talking about product data and engineers working with CAD and BOMs, they might have to access, lots of systems to just affect maybe one change. They've got their CAD system, their PDM system, the PLM system, the ERP system, the quality system. You've got some external database, access database that somebody wrote for you 15 years ago, and you really don't want to use it anymore, but you can't really do what you need to do without it. Right? And those problems have costs, right? Surveys have shown that, the vast majority of products, new products, miss their target costs, or their cost targets, sorry, and most of them also miss their launch date. And, first to market in something new can, that first mover advantage can be huge, right? And if your existing legacy systems are preventing you from achieving that goal, it's costing you money to do nothing. There is a cost associated with doing nothing, right? Now, if we're talking about not just managing the data, but also collaborating, both internally and externally, that's certainly getting a lot more complex. Again, small and medium business are increasingly outsourcing, not just manufacturing, but also, design work, working with the actual intellectual property versus just, having things made. And of course, again, the pandemic has only highlighted the problems that companies have in this area of collaboration. Distributed workforce used to mean maybe we have a couple of satellite offices. Now we have a satellite office for every employee because everyone's working from home. The fact that we've got so much information coming at us from so many different places, being able to consolidate that data and get a clear picture of things when you need it can be vital. And in a lot of cases, you just don't have it. And so if you've ever, I'm sure you've run into this situation before where someone sends you an email, it gets lost in the flood of 100 emails that you get every day, something gets missed, and now suddenly you're behind. And if that happens every day, you're behind every day, right? And again, there's measurable business impact to the difficulty with collaboration and the difficulty of finding things and missing targets, right? Based on surveys by Tech Clarity, the majority of respondents are missing design due dates, they're missing their time to market goals, they're overrunning project and program budgets. Quality seems to be a bit of the outlier there because quality is something that will absolutely directly impact, not only a given product, but your business reputation, right? So quality clearly gets a bit more attention than some of these other things, but it doesn't have to be that way. We can bring all of these bars down if we do things right. And you can do that by keeping data at the center, right? Companies really struggle with this, finding the right information, wasting time looking for things. I know I did this 6 months ago and now I just can't find it anymore. Reusing data. If you're a configure to order or an engineer to order type manufacturer, being able to take something you did for customer A and for customer B, it needs just to be a little bit different. If you can't do that effectively, you are wasting tons of time redoing work that you shouldn't do otherwise, right? And then again, something we've been working with our customers a lot with recently, working on wrong or outdated data. That is, you're shooting yourself in the foot. There are ways to prevent these things. And anytime you cut a piece of metal wrong, that costs you money. Anytime someone catches a mistake in the shop because it's out of date and then they have to go back to engineering and get something resolved, that's costing you money. Having the right processes in place, making sure your data is properly managed, and making sure your people can talk to each other and collaborate properly, that can solve these problems, right? So, you might ask yourself, when it comes to product and data management specifically, have you lost product data, right? Could you just not find something anymore? You did it before and I need to use it again, but I don't have time to find it, so I'm just going to do it. Did you ever find it? Did you have to redo a bunch of work? Have you started making something only to realize later you were using the wrong rev of the print, for example? What did that cost you? And more importantly, did you figure out why? And did you do anything to keep it from happening again? Or is it just the cost of doing business because we don't have the time or the money to implement PDM or PLM, so we're just going to live with the fact that we have a certain percentage of scrap due to the wrong print being in somebody's hand, once a month. And then aside from that kind of direct cost, what value is there in all of your people, engineers especially, but everybody being able to find the right information at the right time and understanding what they did in the past? Right. So data obviously is a key component. Managing data properly is a key component for overcoming these challenges. Getting people working properly together is another one, right? A near majority of companies report issues with collaboration, and everybody at some point has trouble communicating with someone else they've got to work with. So that number, I'm guessing, is just low, right? Maybe 40% is the people that we know we have this problem and we know it costs us money. The other 60% probably, just aren't aware of it. And that collaboration, kind of falls into two buckets: working internally with other parts of the company, but also, again, increasingly working with third parties. Customers always, of course, but increasingly suppliers and outside contractors, etc. So if you aren't sure if collaboration problems are causing you money or time, you can ask yourself, our engineers, can they work together effectively no matter where they are and no matter when they are, right? If we've got resources in India working for us and we're in the Midwest United States, that's, a good 10 plus time difference, hour, 10 days, depending on, the time of year. And so it's not just where they are, but when you are as well. But even within and outside of engineering, how well can engineers collaborate with other departments? And can you share data easily outside the company in a secure way, right? You can always just throw something on an email, but where does that email go after you release it? And how much do you have to share with somebody? And what do you do when that information comes back to you? Now you have to process it somehow and do something with it. And there's an opportunity for problems there as well. How much time do people waste in meetings, right? That could be solved if somebody just was able to make a note in a system somewhere and everybody can see it and understand it. That's, if nothing else, one less bullet point on an agenda in a meeting. to save you some time. Accessing data equally. I talk with companies about this every day. We have 5 locations around the US. We have a central file share in Cleveland. We have people working in LA and New Orleans and maybe even Toronto. The people in Cleveland have no problem opening up an inventor assembly, but when somebody does it from LA, they can't do it. So then they copy files to their local computer and do some work there, and then they try to copy it back up, and they have problems, and now they've got duplicate files everywhere. People are going to do whatever they can to work as effectively as they can. And if you don't give them a way to work effectively and correctly, they're going to work effectively and do it wrong. So you should really ask yourself, can everybody who needs to get to the data get to it in a way that keeps them productive? Because they're going to get leaned on to get something done, and they're going to do whatever they have to do to get it done, even if that means causing more problems tomorrow because they're getting leaned on today. So collaboration, people aren't important. Doing all of that right is an important part of solving these business challenges. Data, of course, but also process. If you have all of your data managed the right way and you have everybody talking, you can still fall down if the right things don't get done at the right time, or if people don't know what they need to do when they need to do it. Change is hard to manage, right? The need for a change to be executed comes from a lot of different places. Getting that information properly communicated back to engineering so decisions can be made, and then communicating that information back to stakeholders so that that change can properly be executed. That takes good communication, but it also takes good processes, right? There are a lot of people involved, and part of being productive is doing only what you need to do and only when you need to do it. And managing change is, the biggest challenge that a lot of people have. Managing bills of material and configurations are another big one. And then, project execution, there's a whole discipline around project management and execution. And in a lot of cases, that gets a lot of attention, and that's great. But I know some project managers, and they are chronically overworked. The more you can do to smooth things out for them, the better everything's going to go, right? So some questions you might ask yourself, especially if, again, you've got these challenges, you're trying to find out how to solve them, or if we should bother solving them, if we need to look at fixing them. Just think about the process you use today for handling changes and release. Are they efficient? Is everyone involved who needs to be? Would it be nice to get sales involved in a certain type of change, or is it just too much work for the benefit? If you can reduce the amount of work it takes to get more people involved, you can start to realize that benefit. How much hair do your project managers have left? Can they see what's going on? If you ask a project manager, what's this project like? And if they say, I'll get back to you in a few hours, that's a problem. They need better information. And as always, do you need to comply with certain industry standards or government regulations? If you do, really think about how you ensure compliance. If managing compliance issues slows you down, and if you have issues, has it cost you customers? Has it cost you business? Has it cost you expensive audits? Again, process is, again, key to solving some of these business challenges. Now, Upchain from Autodesk is something that can help you improve your data management, make sure people are collaborating effectively, and make sure that your processes are solid and effective. And Upchain is very interesting because it is a fully cloud-based PDM and PLM solution that is largely CAD agnostic, and it is designed to be used essentially out of the box. One of the biggest issues with product lifecycle management software is that most of them, when you buy the software, that's the easy part. Then you've got to get it implemented. You've got to get processes built out. You've got to get people trained. Upchain is designed to be easy to use with lots of very solid industry best practice processes, and instant on, right? It's cloud-based. It is completely cloud-based and hosted. You turn it on and it's ready to use. Right? So Upchain has some core capabilities. It's best at things like change management, supplier management, CAD data and document management, and BOM management. It also does a pretty good job at things like new product introduction, project management, workflow, and quality, right? So everything you see on this chart, Upchain can play a role in. And we're going to talk about some of that capability here in a minute, right? So that you can take your disconnected, disjointed teams today that are constantly cross-talking and get everybody organized into a system that lets them collaborate effectively and get done what they need to get done when they need it done. So let's talk now about where Upchain fits in the current Autodesk product portfolio. I know when I first saw that Autodesk acquired Upchain, my first thought was, why did they do that? Because they already have PLM and they already have PDM. But it really does make sense. And I want to first start by talking about the current ways that people access the various Autodesk PDM and PLM products, and why Upchain is so useful and why it is such a great option to have. So a lot of our customers today that are using Autodesk CAD products use Autodesk Vault to manage the data itself. Vault is a PDM, product data management solution. And Vault is designed to live inside your company firewall. It really can't and should not be directly accessed from the internet, at least not today. Right? Now, there's another product in the portfolio called Fusion 360 Manage. Now, this is product lifecycle management. It is fully cloud-based, but it is not product data management. It does not manage CAD files. So Fusion 360 Manage is a very powerful product lifecycle management software, very flexible, very configurable, completely cloud-based, but it doesn't manage the CAD data. Now, because it lives in the cloud, you can get to it from anywhere. If you're inside the firewall, if you're at your company's office, it uses a window through your firewall that's already open, the HTTP protocol. And access to it is controlled securely through Autodesk. They use industry standard authentication. They manage the security on their end. And so it can be exposed to the world, and no matter where you are, you can get access to it. Upchain is essentially the same, right? Upchain is completely cloud-based. And so you would access that, if you're inside the firewall, you would access that through the usual window that, all the other internet traffic goes through pretty much. And there is the capability to have Fusion 360 Manage and Vault communicate with each other. There's a product called Power PLM to integrate the two. And so this is one way that you can achieve a joint PDM PLM solution, is on-premise Vault, cloud-based Fusion 360 Manage, and have the two talk to each other. But again, all of that communication still goes through the usual window that's already open through your firewall. And of course, Vault is not actually listening. That's the key. Vault is not listening for any random communication to come through that window. It's always making the request. So that is how it stays secure. Now, if you're outside the firewall, you can connect to Fusion 360 Manage and Upchain, no problem. Again, Autodesk authentication, everything's safe and secure. So you might think, well, why don't we just open a window through our firewall and talk to Vault as well? But you do not want to do that. Vault is not designed to do that. That means you need a VPN to tunnel through, right? And VPNs have their own problems depending on how it's configured. All of the traffic for everything here might end up going through the VPN. You're beholden to your company's bandwidth to the internet for this data, no matter how fast your connection is at home. If your company connection is slow, your connection to your Vault is slow, right? So depending on where your people are, if they're inside the firewall mostly, or if they're mostly working from home or at third-party companies, some of these solutions will be better than others. Now, there is something coming fairly soon, I believe, from Autodesk to make it easier for people outside the firewall to connect with an on-premise Vault without using a VPN, but it's not here yet, and I don't know exactly how that's going to wash out. So that's why Upchain is so interesting, because Upchain can do a lot of what Vault does for you, but it's all completely in the cloud. So let's talk a little bit now about how they compare from a functionality standpoint. What can each of these products do? So Fusion 360 Manage, it is cloud-based PLM only. Yes, you can attach files to objects in Fusion 360 Manage, but it is not designed to manage CAD data. You cannot check out a CAD file, modify it, and check it back in. Fusion 360 Manage does not have that capability. But the plus side there is, it doesn't matter what CAD system you have, you can use Fusion 360 Manage. And we just, talked with a company yesterday that doesn't have any CAD at all, but the functionality that Fusion 360 Manage provides is intriguing and useful for them. So even without CAD, you can make use of Fusion 360 Manage. It is extremely flexible and extremely configurable. But especially as of earlier this year, it is also extremely capable out of the box, by default. There are lots of just fantastic processes and workflows built into Fusion 360 Manage so that you can start using it right away. So that's Fusion 360 Manage, cloud-based PLM. Then we have Autodesk Vault. Vault is on-premise PDM, basically document management or data management, with some light PLM functionality. It starts to cross over into sort of PLM when we're talking about bills of material and change management. But Vault really is designed to be used mostly within engineering. We do have customers that have other parts of the business using Vault, but even its change engine is really designed to facilitate engineering changes. It's not necessarily well suited for enterprise-wide change management. It does, however, support the Autodesk CAD applications better than any other PDM or PLM solution. I've seen lots of other solutions that manage Autodesk data, Inventor data, AutoCAD data, and some of them do a pretty good job. Upchain is one of those. Even before Autodesk acquired it was pretty good. But Vault is still best. And it also does have some support for other CAD systems, specifically SolidWorks is very good, Creo is pretty good. So that's Vault, on-premise PDM. Now you can put Vault in the cloud, but it's still inside your firewall. It still needs to be connected to securely somehow, and you're still managing a server. You're really putting Vault in the cloud on cloud infrastructure. It's not a completely hosted software as a service. It is infrastructure as a service if you're putting Vault in the cloud. Now, Upchain is the newest member of this team, and it is fully cloud-based, fully hosted PLM and PDM. So that means not only can it do processes, things like enterprise-wide change management, bill of materials management, project and program management, supplier collaboration, but it also manages CAD data, check in and check out, and version history, visualization, things like that. And it is itself still configurable. I wouldn't say it's not, I would say, even nearly as configurable as Fusion 360 manages today. You can still do some configuration, but it is very capable out of the box, and it is designed to be put to use right away without a even weeks long, let alone months long implementation. You can turn it on and start using it right away. And then I do want to mention one more aspect of this environment that I think doesn't get a lot of attention, but it can get very confusing, mostly based on its name. Autodesk Fusion 360 Manage extension. So Fusion 360 Manage is the cloud-based, extremely powerful PLM solution. The Manage extension for Autodesk Fusion 360 is different. Autodesk Fusion 360, the product, is cloud-based CAD. The managed extension for Autodesk Fusion 360 is an extension for the Fusion 360 CAD application to help you manage release and revision for Fusion 360 data, right? It's not really configurable. It is not a light version of Fusion 360 Manage. It is a way to manage Fusion 360 data. So it really is not like the others. It's not its own fully fledged system, but I thought it bared mentioning because if nothing else, people see the name around there and they hear the name, and I wanted to make sure I put it in the proper context. Now, what I understand from folks at Autodesk is that the eventual goal, and this is, I'm assuming, a very long-term goal, is to take the best parts of all of these and combine them eventually into a new platform, some sort of platform. I don't know how new it's going to be, how different it's going to be, if it's going to be its own separate product. I don't know any of that, and I'm Hagerman, not Autodesk. But what I understand is the goal is to eventually, over time, sort of merge these things together into a platform that offers the best of everything. And most importantly, provide a way for you, wherever you are today, if you're a Vault user, if you're a Fusion 360 Manage user, if you're an Upchain user, or if you do your CAD in Fusion 360, eventually you will be able to take advantage of the best of everything. Again, I have no idea what that's going to look like. Autodesk, they haven't shared anything that I've seen that has any definitive plans about that, but that's what I'm told that we can tell everybody that we talk to is there is a vision to move all of these things eventually to something where you have the best of everything. First class cloud PDM with extremely easy to use, but also very powerful business process management in the form of PLM all together, right? And I see it already in the way things are kind of merging together. The fact that you can buy Vault and Fusion 360 managed together as a single license now, right? The intent is to have PDM and PLM. They're just complexities with that from company to company. Can you use cloud-based PDM, or do you really need on-premise, right? The cloud is fantastic, but it's not for everything. And so I don't see this changing. I don't see any of these products going away anytime in the next few years at a minimum. But what we've been told is if you decide today that Upchain is good for you, you're not going to be left in the lurch a few years from now. The product's not just going to disappear and then you're going to be forced to make some difficult migration to something else. That is not the goal here. The goal is to make it eventually possible for all of these products to either work together or merge together into something that everyone can be happy with. Okay, so hopefully that helps position Upchain in the existing portfolio, the products that Autodesk can offer. So let's spend some time now talking about functionality and what Upchain can do today. So engineering data management overall, PDM and PLM. And a lot of that centers around the bill of materials. So I'll be using some terms here over the next few minutes. I want to make sure we understand we're on the same page in terms of what those means because they're acronyms. But especially if we're talking about a flow from start to finish in terms of, say, a change or a release, we'll start in CAD often with what's called the CAD BOM, the CAD bill of materials. And when it comes to Upchain, that can come from a lot of different places. AutoCAD, Inventor, SolidWorks, Creo, NX, Altium as well. There are ways to get an AutoCAD electrical BOM in there. That would come through the ability to import a BOM from Excel, right? Now, once it gets into the PLM system, once you've taken your CAD data and added it to, in this case, Upchain, the idea then is to flesh out and develop the engineering build of materials, right? So CAD BOM is what we drew. Engineering BOM is the full definition from engineering of what this product is. And today, Upchain can also maintain what's called an SBOM or a service BOM. Basically, of all of the parts that we've said are required to make this thing, what might need service? What spare parts do we need? But also, maybe we need to include on the service BOM this servicing kit. The kit isn't integral to the operation of the machine, but if you're going to repair it, you're going to want this kit. That could go on the service BOM, for example. And Upchain can help you build that out. And then from there, typically, you would go on to your ERP system where execution happens. And you'll see this term XBomb. And X is more or less this idea that you might have one BOM for one master BOM that can essentially be interpreted in different ways, be it the CAD BOM from your CAD system, the EBOM that's maintained in PLM, the manufacturing BOM that ERP for sure owns because it's about execution, but also an as-built BOM. What did this thing look like when it left? And an as-maintained BOM. What does it look like now that it's been in the field for 3 years and we've upgraded it and done this thing and that thing to it, right? So today, Upchain can manage EBOM and SBOM, and it's my understanding that it's on the roadmap for Upchain to eventually be able to handle the XBomb, which is slice this BOM whatever way you need to for the task at hand, right? So with that sort of explanation in hand, let's look at functionality just a little bit here. And we're going to start with the interface. So what you'll see here, this is the Upchain interface. This is what you would see in a web page. It's clean and it's modern. What you see here at the top is a list of projects. Projects are really the heart of Upchain and how it lets you collect information together and work on it effectively as a unit. Now, down at the bottom part of the screen, you'll see I have an activity stream, which is information about the projects that I care about. I have a list of favorite items, and then all the things that are assigned to me specifically, all the tasks that I have. Now, when we look at a project itself, you can see we've got a handy interface over on the left, very easy to use. It breaks up the various things you might need to do within a project. And it's really designed to be usable by both infrequent users and people that use it every day. Now, the dashboard is the main page, and you can see KPIs and make sure you get a nice, clear picture of the health of the project right at a glance. Of course, the bill of materials, we talked about that just a second ago. That's an important aspect. But then also project management. Projects need to be managed, and projects are managed via tasks, milestones, and stage gates. We can take care of all of those in Upchain. Now, tasks can be associated with artifacts of the project, be it a deliverable or reference documents, so that when I have a task, I have supporting documentation at my fingertips. We also can look at processes as well, investigation requests, change requests, quality, right? And get a snapshot of the processes around that project. And of course, in addition to the CAD data, we can also manage non-CAD documents, supporting documents, so that we can keep track of everything we need to keep track of to arrive at a complete product definition. Right. Then, of course, access. Not everybody needs to work on every project. Projects can be public or private, and you can build out a team of participants with their roles to make sure that things get routed to the right people at the right time. So one of the most exciting things about Upchain, in my mind, is its CAD management, its CAD data management in the cloud, right? And note, this was a functional product in production prior to Autodesk's acquisition of it. That means it was created originally by a company that was not Autodesk, and so they worked with lots of different CAD vendors. So it does support Inventor, AutoCAD, and AutoCAD Electrical, but it also supports SolidWorks, CATIA, Creo, NX, Altium, and Onshape. And it does this by through the use of a CAD plugin. So this plugin, it's the same, or this connector is the same for all CAD systems. So no matter what CAD system your users are using, they're going to have the same experience, right? Again, SolidWorks, CATIA, NX, Inventor, AutoCAD, and Creo. Now, this is an add-in, right? It's in Canvas, in SolidWorks, and you see we're looking at SolidWorks 2020 right here. We have the same experience inside Inventor, and you can see all the information that you would otherwise see in Upchain in the web interface right here in this plugin. For example, our assignments. We can look at an assignment that we have. We can look at the information about it, right? So we can see for this assignment, here's what I need to do. We can also see supporting documentation. For example, a markup, right? So someone could do a markup inside the web interface, mark that up, attach it to a task, and now I can see that through the CAD plugin. I can also see all of the items and parts associated with this assignment, again, right there on the assignment page, and I can open up that file directly from Upchain. And you'll notice that was pretty fast, and we are looking at a video right now, but it would have been that fast even live because Upchain does cache files locally. You still have this concept of a local workspace with Upchain. So you have the files local, much like you would with Autodesk Vault, for speed and reliability, but then eventually they get added back to the cloud. And that works in the same way you might work something like Autodesk Vault. You check out the file, you get a copy of it, you check out the file to make changes. That file is checked out to you and locked to others, right? And now we can make the edits that we need to affect this change, right? So in this case, we're going to open up this belt and modify its thickness. So this is just, what you would do in CAD, right? So we've now seen we have an assignment, seen what we've needed to do, and now we're in the middle of making that change, and we still have never left the CAD application. So our change is done. We can save it. We can go back to the assembly level, and we can check back in the assembly and the part that we've now modified. And then we get a confirmation dialog that lets us put in notes, change description for the assembly and the part separately if we needed to, right? So this lets us verify what we're checking in, what's going to happen from the CAD BOM to the engineering BOM, right? So this is a confirmation dialog. If we'd add new components, we'd get new items created, etc. So once we provide information about what we did, hit OK, check back into the system, padlocks are gone, and now someone else, if they needed to, they could go and make edits. You might see here quickly, there are version information down here too, right? So Upchain keeps track of version information, and then this thing is immediately available within Upchain for non-CAD users to investigate. So what we're seeing now is the Upchain interface on the web, where they can visualize this, take measurements, even do markups and such if they needed to. Right. So the CAD management is very good. I think they've done a great job making it easy to use, even though it's cloud-based. You do get a copy locally. Once you've got that local copy, everything is fast and stable. And then when you're done, you check in your changes, right? And so everything still lives in the cloud, but you can work fast no matter where you are. So now let's talk a little bit about BOM management and visualization, right? So BOMs are a very important part of PLM. What we can see here, this is a bill of materials in Upchain, and it's for an electromechanical component, right? A little webcam we have here. And this BOM is made up of data from different sources, right? So we have physical components that came from a mechanical CAD system, in this case, SolidWorks. And then we have electrical data about the PCB and internal wiring, et cetera. That, in this case, came from Altium. So those got added together in Upchain, two different systems added together in Upchain, along with other supporting documentation and items to flesh out the entire bill of materials for the top level SKU of this camera, right? So data from lots of different places combined together seamlessly. Now, if you need to investigate a BOM, you can look at individual components and view models or drawings. You can start business processes from a couple clicks right on any of these items. Copy and paste to manipulate bills of material, very intuitive. Visualization is a very important part of Upchain, right? So we can import and export data for sure, but visualizing information is key. So for example, we can compare a bill of materials, one version to another, to see what's changed between these two minor or major revs that we're going to investigate, right? So color-coded, nice, easy to use icons. Green means it's new. Red means it's been deleted. Yellow means something about it changed. And you can even hover over the little icon to show exactly what changed. In this case, it was revision changed to that component. But not only can we compare a BOM like this, but we can actually do a 3D comparison. We can compare the two different revision models. And again, green is new, red is old. So we get both a BOM comparison, but also a 3D model comparison, which is just amazing. And then of course, viewing things in Upchain. If you've ever seen Autodesk's Cloud Viewer, this is from a capability standpoint is virtually identical. We can cut sections, we can do exploded views, we can do markups, we can take measurements, right? And the interesting thing about markups inside Upchain is we can do our markup and then we can immediately create an investigation request based on that markup and kick off a change process, right? And if we're talking about change, Upchain is extremely capable in that area as well. It comes with a whole group of out-of-the-box default business processes, things for change requests, change notices, quality, etc. Right? So there are a bunch of processes pre-existing, but you can also create your own. This is just a little view of the workflow editor in this case. So whether you start completely from scratch or an existing workflow, you can build out a process to meet your needs, right? And that's really as simple as drag and drop and connect the dots, right? There is a whole group of what are called primitives for certain, actions within a workflow, making a decision, a task, representing a notification or an update, printing something out, et cetera, right? You just play connect the dots and your workflow is done, right? Now, in terms of putting these things to use, let's say we need to do a change request. You could select one or more components from the BOM and initiate a change request. Or in this case, our goal is to release this assembly. So we can create a change request right from the top level, right? You'll notice that all of these components are currently in development, right? And they currently have no major rev. XX is like null rev in Upchain by default. And we can release all of these in one go, all the children included, by creating a new change request and assigning to it a workflow that will allow us to release this, right? So you might fill out a description. You can also choose a major or minor release type. Or going to be a major rev bump or a minor rev bump. And then, of course, a revision note. You could have individual notes for each component if you wanted to. You could also associate documents with this change. Now, you pick the type of workflow, right? Because depending on if it's a simple part release or more complex, or maybe it's actually a change, maybe it's a safety issue, right? You might have different people involved. That's where the different workflows come in. But once you start the workflow, you will then have a task, in this case, to release the items. Once we release the items, in this case, this example, it's the same person doing everything. In reality, you'd have multiple people pushing these buttons. But once I release the items, what we'll see is we'll be back to the BOM and it will be released with a new major rev. Right. And then one last bit of functionality to talk about is supplier participation and supplier collaboration, because this to me is the best part of Upchain when it comes to process. Here's a component that we need to have made. We could get it made from a few different places, right? Upchain can maintain a list of people from whom we might buy something like this, and we can add those possible suppliers to this specific component in the system, right? And let's say we need to get a quote from Sammy Supplier to have some of these made. We can actually create a process inside Upchain to share information with Sammy and get information back from them and have that information go directly into the system, right? So this is going to be an RFQ. So we fill out some basic information. This is what we need. Here's a picture of it. They're eventually going to be able to get access to it in Upchain. We'll see in a second. We can also add documentation to this. So in this case, an RFQ form we want them to fill out. Once we start this process, what we're seeing now is Sammy's inbox, right? Sammy gets an email with a link to get into Upchain, and this link is only good for Sammy. No one else can access this data. If you use that link, it's going to have you log in as Sammy, right? And now they're in Upchain. They're in our tenant, but they can only see what we want them to see. They can see, in this case, the 3D model, and then they have access to their specific details about this component. What is their part number? What does it cost? Any notes they might want to make about it, right? But then if you remember that RFQ form, we can also have them fill that form out by checking it out from Upchain, making their modifications, and then checking it back in. But again, they're now working in Upchain, and they don't need a license of Upchain to do this. We can have anybody we want do this, right? So they fill out their RFQ, they check it back in, and then that information is immediately available to anyone now inside Upchain. They can see straight away, here's what Sammy charges for this, and we can get access to their filled out RFQ. Right. So again, that was a very high overview of Upchain functionality, but I hope it gave you a little taste of what it can do. And I hope maybe it gives you a glimpse of how it can help you solve some of these problems we talked about at the outset, right? A lot of systems are still built for the way we did things 10 or 15 years ago. You need to adapt or you're going to get left behind. That adaptation is really the way it's going, is both your data and your process management in the cloud, easy access to everyone, and Upchain can help you reach that future. All right, so we've run a little over on time, but if you've got any questions, I haven't seen anything come in. I hope that's a good thing. But if you've got any questions at this point, please feel free to fire away and I'll do my best to answer them. Okay, I'm still not seeing anything come in. We have a relatively small group today. So I think, Ashley, we'll go ahead and wrap it up. And if you do have any questions, anyone, please feel free to reach out to me or your Hagerman account manager, and we'll do our best to get those addressed.
Okay, well, thank you, Forrest, for the presentation, and thank you all for attending today. If you do think of additional questions, you can reply to that confirmation or reminder email you receive from GoToWebinar. We can get those to Forrest or your sales rep to get your questions answered. Once again, a short survey will pop up as we close down, and also a reminder that you will receive an email tomorrow with a link to the recording that you can watch this again. Forrest, it does look like a question popped in if you want to answer that.
Yeah, just real quick. There's no integration with Fusion 360. Unfortunately, Fusion 360 is one of those things that nothing really manages it because that data is stored essentially in the cloud. If you haven't already looked at the Fusion 360 Manage extension, if you need to do things like release management and change management with Fusion 360 data, I'd recommend looking at the Manage extension. Otherwise, you could still use Upchain to manage processes and other documents and even say neutral format exports from Fusion 360. But right now there's no direct integration with like a bomb from Fusion 360 into Upchain.
Okay. Well, again, thank you for attending everyone, and we will wrap up, but have a great day.